Hey everyone, it's Sean. Thanks for checking out part 3 of me talking about Marvel Comics and my love for comic books. Thanks for checking out part 2 as well, and thanks for all your awesome comments and letting me know your favourite comic books as well. It's been so cool reading the different opinions from people about comic books, so thanks for that. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on Instagram, SeanBradley1986, and make sure you follow Sota. If you search for Eigo no Sota on Instagram or on YouTube, you can find him on there. We've got lots of cool videos coming soon, so make sure you check it out. So let's get into part 3. So, in part 2, we talked about how my love for comic books kind of changed from just comic books, but also moved into the world of cinema as well. So, last time we talked about how the Marvel characters were starting to get their own movies and how Marvel had actually managed to get their own characters back to their studio. So this would have been, I guess, in the later part of the kind of 2010s, because over the next few years, I remember that Marvel Studios were kind of building towards an Avengers movie. So that would be Iron Man and Hulk and Thor and Captain America. Because all of these characters over the few years between Iron Man originally being released in 2008, all of these characters were getting their own movies, and we were starting to see how all of these movies were kind of connecting together. This was mind-blowing for me, because I'd been reading about all of these characters for so many years, and then seeing them on the big screen and watching them interact with each other eventually, the crossovers that happened was amazing. And then eventually they were making an Avengers movie. So this was when I got really excited, because now finally, Iron Man and Thor and Captain America being joined by, Hawkeye and Black Widow, everybody just coming together, just like in the comic books that I read when I was a kid, coming together. I couldn't believe it. And I was waiting for that moment where all of the characters would be together in one shot, just like in the comic books. I wanted that double page image of all of the characters with Captain America in the middle shouting "Avengers Assemble!" like in the middle. But in that Avengers movie, they had a similar shot, and I remember it pretty well. Like, all of the characters are standing back to back, and I think the camera kind of swings around the characters so you can see all of them, and that brought back so many great childhood memories, seeing all of these characters together. But Captain America didn't shout "Avengers Assemble." But it was still an amazing movie. It was so awesome to see all of these characters together. So if we fast forward to about 2015, and I knew that I was going to be moving to Japan. I knew, because as much as I love comic books, I love Japan that little bit more. So I knew that I would be moving to Japan at some point, and I knew two things. Number one, it was going to be very expensive to move to Japan. I have to pay for my flights. I have to save enough to pay my rent for a few months, or whilst I'm searching for a job or something, right? And the second thing I knew was that I couldn't take my comic book collection with me, right? I'd been collecting comics since, well, as you guys remember, from part 1 my brother gave me that comic book, which I colored in by mistake. I still regret it even now. I'm 35 years old and I still remember that day. But I knew that this huge comic book collection that I've been collecting since that point couldn't come with me to Japan. So I had to make a really difficult decision, and I had to sell my comic books. So I went through, the 500, 600 or something crazy comic books that I had, and I picked out the handful of comics which were very meaningful to me. So, for example, like the first comic book that my mother picked out for me, I kept that one. The comic book that I talked about originally in part 1 with the hologram, I kept that one as well. But I only kept a handful, so that's about 10 comics from a collection of over 600. And I asked a few of my friends, I asked people online and said, does anyone want to buy these comic books that I've been collecting? And a couple of people were interested. They said, oh yeah, I'm interested. How much? And I wasn't trying to be greedy. I wasn't trying to make a profit on my collection. I just wanted to know that they were going to be given to somebody that will look after them. I sound like I'm talking about children or something, but I just wanted to make sure that they were going to somebody who would appreciate the effort that went into my collection. So I put a value of about £1,000 on this collection, and that sounds like a lot of money, but for some of the comics that were in there, like I had issue 1 of some different characters, I had collector's editions, I had some comics that were signed by the artists as well. So I think that collection, like my collection, would have been worth easily about £2,000, maybe more than that. But the problem is trying to find somebody with £2,000 that is willing to just buy a collection of comic books, right? So when I was putting it online, I put all my comic books online, I had to be realistic and realize that people wouldn't have £2,000. So I said, okay, £850 is the lowest that I can go. And I put them up online, and surprisingly, I got one guy who, I think he was from London. He saw my post online and he drove from London to my hometown in Tamworth. That's not a short drive. That's like a 4 or 5 hours drive, depending on traffic. Because he saw that I had a few comics in my collection that he really wanted, that he didn't have. So he came to my house and I showed him the comics, and I said, I've been collecting these since I was 7 or 8 years old. And he was amazed by this collection. He said, wow, I can't believe you've got this comic book. I can't believe you've had this for so long. I can't believe you've got this one, and so on. So I realized then how important my collection was, and he offered me the £850 that I asked for, and he said, are you sure this is enough? But I wasn't trying to be greedy. I just needed enough money to get me to Japan and pay for a few months rent, so that I could pursue my even bigger dream of living in Japan and living here. So comics in a way helped me pursue my main dream of moving and living in Japan, right? So that's how important comic books are to me. But yeah, like I said, I kept a handful of meaningful comics. I didn't sell all of them, I kept the ones that meant a lot to me, and I even had a special frame made one of my friends who I knew from my photography business, I asked them if they could make me a special frame which had like a nice thick black frame with like a white border around the edge with 6 slots that I could put the comic books in, so I could have this huge frame with 6 comic books on display. And that's still in England. I still have that. It's like a custom frame. I'm not sure how I'm going to get that to Japan because it weighs so much. I guess I might have to just take the comic books out of the frame and just have the comic book shipped over, and then maybe try to find a frame that's similar, perhaps. But yeah, so I sold my comic book collection, and it really hurt to hand over all of my comic books. But, you know, in 2015, I moved to Japan, and it was because of comic books that, you know, it was able to help me afford to be able to do that. So now I'm in Japan, and finding Marvel comics in English are even harder than, you know, I had finding them in England, right? So I gave up collecting comics in Japan, and I just started to pick up ones that I saw from time to time, like out and about. Out and about just means when you're around kind of shopping or outside. So sometimes I'd see, you know, Marvel comics from time to time, and I'd pick them up. But, you know, I had this small collection now in Japan of these comic books. But in 2015, Marvel was still making these amazing comic book movies. So I could still enjoy Marvel comics through this huge collection of movies that were being released like almost every year. And over the years, I saw so many of the storylines that I read about in the comics kind of coming to life on the big screen. And I remember it was in Japan that I had my first 4D experience at the cinema. I watched Captain America Civil War, and I don't know if many of you have tried 4D yet. It's very interesting. If you've been to 4D, if you've been to a 4D cinema, send me a message. Let me know what you thought of it. But in a 4D cinema, you know, you have your regular cinema seat, but the seat kind of lifts up and moves around, and it vibrates, and it kind of spits water into your face in like some scenes. And there's when the explosions happen, there's like a smell of smoke in the air. So it's all of your senses, you know, sight, sound, smell, even taste, I guess, because you could taste the kind of smoke in the air, which kind of adds to this kind of cinema experience. But yeah, so eventually, you know, Marvel had been making all of these movies every year, and after over 10 years worth of Marvel movies, they announced they were doing the big Avengers movie, which would be split into 2 parts. And there was Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And I remember I watched Infinity War, obviously in Japan. I watched it in English for the first time. And then I went to the cinema and I watched it again in Japanese, just to see how the voices were different and how the characters were in Japanese. And then I watched it again in 4D. So I watched Infinity War 3 times in total, once in English, once in Japanese, and then again in 4D. And yeah, I won't spoil the movie for you, because there might be somebody who hasn't seen it yet and they're thinking about watching it. But the movie, so there were 2 movies. There was Infinity War and Endgame, and they were separated by a year. So a year gap between them. And even comic book fans didn't know which direction they were going to take the story. Were they going to copy the comic books, or were they going to change it slightly? And nobody knew. So there was lots of hype for Endgame. Hype is Hype, and hype just means that kind of excitement and energy around it. And there was lots of hype around Endgame. And I remember I've been waiting for this movie for so long. You got 10 years of cinema characters, all of those comic books that I read as a kid, right? All coming together. They've all had their own stories over the years, and then they've all had their own individual movies. And then we've got this Avengers Endgame where all of these characters are coming together for one big battle. And again, like, no spoilers, but I've been waiting so long for that scene. There's a scene where all of the characters are on the screen at once, and Captain America just kind of stands right at the front of all the characters, and he shouts, "Avengers, assemble!" And then all of these characters just rush across the screen. So amazing, and I got goosebumps. Goosebumps at GOOSEBUMPS, like torihada. So my skin became all bumpy, and my hair stood up on end, and I couldn't believe that I could finally see, Captain America on the big screen shouting, "Avengers, assemble!" So amazing. But yeah, again, I watched Endgame maybe 3 times at the cinema. Yeah. I loved it so much. I couldn't get enough. And I think I nearly cried at that moment when all of those characters are on the screen. Like, I was so emotional. Like, all of the years that I collected comic books, all of the years that I'd watched the TV shows and the movies, and it got to this point. And it was just so amazing to see all of those characters all together. So that brings us to kind of now. So Endgame was the kind of finale of all of those characters' stories, and now it's like a new era or a new period of Marvel movies. And now that Marvel is owned by Disney, it means that Disney can also be creative with those characters as well. So now with Disney Plus, I can watch all of those movies again. Like on the weekend, I can just relax, stick a movie on that I've watched a million times before, and I can just binge watch all of these movies, and relax. Binge watch. Binge watch is a very native phrase. Binge, which is BINGE, and watch, WATCH. Binge watch just means to watch a TV show or a bunch of movies back to back with no break. So you're just watching it all in one go. So yeah, I just binge watch all of these movies and TV shows. But I've been really enjoying how Marvel Studios has been expanding these stories and these characters and introducing people to more obscure and crazy characters. For example, a couple of years ago, we had the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Guardians of the Galaxy is a really obscure superhero team. Obscure is OBSCURE, and it means very, very rare. Not many people know about it. But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy is now super popular, right? Everybody knows Groot, the big tree, I am Groot, and Rocket Raccoon. Everybody knows these characters now because of the movies and how successful it's been. So that really makes me happy that people can now enjoy comic books in a different way by watching these movies. And the way that these movies can, expand the universe and introduce new characters. Like Disney just released a new TV show called WandaVision, which I've been obsessed with because it's basically a Marvel movie, but it's broken up like a TV show. So there's episodes every week, kind of like this podcast. But that idea of waiting until next week for the next part, it kind of brings back memories of waiting for the next comic book to be released, right? When I was a kid, I couldn't just get all of these comics in one go. I'd have to read the comic, and then I'd have to wait a month or so for the next comic to come out, and then I could read the next one, right? So having a TV show like this has kind of brought back memories of that style. And Marvel have already started talking about plans for the next 3 to 4 years, like all of these new characters that are coming in. Fantastic Four is now back with Marvel and Disney. They were able to buy Fox Studios, so now Marvel owns all of these amazing characters again. So, who knows what will happen in the future? How many characters will they introduce, and where will the story go? But yeah, I don't think I will ever get tired of Marvel cinema or Marvel comics. And, maybe one day I'll give my comic books to my kids, and I hope that they won't color in the pages with coloring crayons like I did. Yeah. So that's all. I hope you've enjoyed me talking about Marvel comics and Marvel movies. If you don't already, please follow me on Instagram, Sean Bradley 1986, SeanBradley 1986. You can follow Sota as well. Search for Eiga no Sota. He's on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. He's everywhere. But drop us a comment. You can send us a message. Let us know what other topics you'd like to hear about for all English episodes. And yeah, I guess I should finish this episode the same way that Stan Lee would finish, with a big Excelsior. So you ready, everybody? Say no. Excelsior!